Welcome to another day at FMX. My name is Anais Torreblanca. I work at Foundry. I'm on the Nuke side, and we're very excited to have today a talk about Carnival Row 2. We're gonna have an exciting discussion about the workflows that they use in Nuke for that troll fight with Orlando Bloom. On the Nuke side, we really like to extend and develop the tool sets that you can use as artists. So we actually did. Sorry, Denise.
Sure.
Thank you. So we actually added a new, quite interesting highlights in the latest release, in the Nuke 14 release. As we're going to be talking about CG compositing, we added a new whole 3D system based on USD. It's a beta feature that we are really looking forward for you to try and give us your feedback so you can help us develop that into the future workflow that we all want. Another amazing feature is actually machine learning. We're going to have a talk about machine learning right after this, so I will encourage you to stay. But even if not, just give it a try because it's something very cool, and we really think that it can help you develop some very cool things. On the timeline side, we also added a new color management features. I won't go into too many details because, to be honest, we added a lot of cool, interesting features on the latest release in Nuke 14. So yeah, just give it a try. I'm just gonna go back now with the topic of the presentation. So today we have with us Dennis from Goodbye Kansas. Dennis is a senior compositor, and some of his latest some of his latest cinematic projects include God of War, Ragnarok, and Forspoken. And today he's gonna talk us about the fight between Legolas and a trolling in Carnival Road 2. So with that, let me introduce you, Dennis Holobianco, to everyone.
Is that right? Cool. Well, hello. Thank you all for coming to this presentation on the VFX of the troll fight in Carnival Row Season 2. Well, let's get started. Boom. Well, some introduction. My name is Denis Holovianko, and I'm a senior compositor at Goodbye Kansas Studios. We are a VFX studio that creates game cinematics, VFX for film and TV. We also provide other services like motion capture, scanning, and visual development. We have offices in Stockholm and London. Let's check out our house reel. Oh.
to next?
All right, so just a little bit about Carnival Row. For context, it's an Amazon TV series that is set in a Victorian era type setting. The show contains different types of mythical creatures, such as fairies, centaurs, fauns, and many more. Goodbye Kansas did VFX work on 8 episodes of the second season. We delivered 123 shots and over 50 environment and character assets. Today, I'll be focusing on one sequence in particular, a troll fight, which took us around 4 months to complete. Let's dive into it. All right. So this fight happens, just again for the context, this fight happens at the start of the first episode, where we find Orlando Bloom's character, Philo, in an underground fighting arena facing multiple opponents, among which is a giant troll. Side note, in the show, if you've seen it, this type of creature is actually called Tro, but for simplicity in this presentation, I will refer to it as a troll. All right, let's take a look at the whole fight sequence first. Okay. All right, so there were a couple of challenges that we faced with this sequence. We had to do a pretty extensive cleanup. Some shots consisted of multiple plates that had to be stitched together in comp. And of course, we also had to animate, render, and integrate a troll that Philo fights. I'll go through these challenges one by one, starting with cleanup. So during the shoot, the part of the troll were played by a stunt actor. The parts of the stunt actor that not covered by the troll had to be cleaned up. In some shots, the actors performed stunts and had wires attached, which also had to be cleaned up. The floor of the set was covered by stunt pads, and the visible stitches between the pads had to be cleaned up as well. Here are a couple of examples of how we use Nuke to do the cleanup. So here at the top right is the original plate. There you can see the stunt actor in blue, as well as wires attached to Orlando Bloom. So to help with the workload, we outsourced the cleanup of the wires. Bottom left is the clean patch for the wires that we received from the outsourcing vendor. And bottom right is the comp, where we started the cleanup by dispilling the stunt actor's blue suit and then applying the wires patch. Although we outsourced the wires cleanup, the stunt actor and the stunt pads cleanup we did in-house. So next to, yes. Every shot had a match moved camera, and the cleanup was done by creating clean patches using both camera projections and 2D tracks. This next patch here is for parts of the floor and background crowd, which was done with frame holds, rotopaint nodes, and spline warps. Top left is the nuke script for the patch. The patches were projected on simple geo, just regular cards that were aligned with the scene correctly. Top left here is how this particular patch was projected. So using both projections and 2D tracks, we continued to layer up clean patches to cover up the stunt actor where needed. Here's the patch for Philo's arm, also a projection. And here's one for the vest. This one is a 2D track with spline warps that warp and morph between different painted frame holds. Bottom right, it's merged over the previous patches. And here you can see the original plate compared to final comp. And now will come example from one more frame. Or again, the outsourced wires patch. Then a projection to cover the top of the stunt actor. And another projection for the background crowd. Just regular paint work and warps applied with projections and 2D tracks. So cleanup perhaps is not like the most spectacular kind of comp task, but I think it's pretty cool when you pull off a good cleanup from a complex plate, since it is a kind of invisible VFX type of work. So here is the comparison between plate and final comp. So this concludes the cleanup part. Next, let's talk about stitching plates. So some shots were shot with multiple plates that had to be stitched together into a single shot. Here's an example. First plate, Philo gets thrown to the ground and picked up by the troll. And then second plate, a stunt actor takes over and gets hurled across the room on wires. This, of course, meant that both plates had to have individual cleanups. And we had to basically pull off a technique in movie making called, I think it's called the Texas switch, where in the same shot, an actor kind of disappears and then the stunt actor takes over. All right. And here is a rough previs of the stitch. Yeah. So this stitch had the timing of each plate approved by the client, so the character would have correct. It's very rough, but that's mostly for editorial department, so we could nail the timing and just a rough repositioning of the character. So let's break all of this down and go through how we then refined and finalized it. Firstly, each plate was projected on simple sphere geometry using its match mode camera. Here's the first plate projected. And the reason it was just a simple projection on a sphere is because during the throw, it's basically a nodal pan. So then we could get away with projecting it on a simple sphere. If this was, of course, a movable camera, then we would have to have a more complex geometry. But since the throw itself was basically a nodal pan, a regular sphere was enough. So this is the first plate. And here's the second plate, also projected with its own camera. So the two plate cameras were then merged into a third camera that became the main render cam for this shot. The new camera also added a slight zoom in during the throw. Here I've cut out the second plate a bit, just to visualize roughly how both plates aligned without any character repositioning. Next up, we cleaned up the wires, the stunt actor, and even Philo, Orlando Bloom's character, so that we could then reposition him freely. Extra clean patches were done for the background specifically to cover the transition between the two plates where the background did not align. So after the cleanup, we could then reposition Philo. So since a large area of the transition between the plates were covered by the troll, we could actually get away with a simple 2D repositioning in Nuke. Here on the left, here on the left is a nuke script, and on the right is the reposition character of the clean plate. So you can see just a pretty simple 2D repositioning. And here is the comparison between projection mockup and the repositioned character. Finally, we add the troll for the final comp. And here is again, the stitch in motion. So the main switch happens behind the troll, and that's the Texas switch I was mentioning before. So we could basically align on the second plate. We could align and slightly retime Philo in just 2D. So all of this required a lot of cleanup, both to cover the stunt actor wires, Philo repositioning, as well as the plate stitching. Here, you can see the sizes of only the cleanup scripts for the two of the shots. So all this work was shared among artists, which meant paying extra attention on having a good communication and keeping the scripts clean. At Goodbye Kansas, in the beginning of every show, we try to set up nice templates for both main and secondary comp tasks, which of course came in handy on this show. Even though you can't really see it because the scripts are so big, if you kind of look carefully at the very top and at the very bottom, the scripts are the same, and a lot of the elements, the way, even though the backdrop colors are different, the same kind of the same techniques are used, and we basically generally try to keep it as clean as possible. So in short, templates are awesome, and that's one of the strengths of Nuke. And this concludes the part about stitching plates. Finally, let's check out how we added the big CG troll to this sequence. So the concepts and visual development for the troll we actually did in-house. After the client was happy with the look and the model of the troll, we could then rig the model and move on to the motion capture. The mocap was recorded in our Stockholm studio. The client provided a LiDAR scan of the set as well as rotomation for Orlando Bloom and the stunt actor. Let's see. Yeah. So this is LiDAR scan and rotomation of Orlando Bloom in action. This is already after we've done the mocap and including the troll model, but you can see the rotomation for Orlando Bloom was provided by the. I wonder if I can play again. Yeah, so rotomation for the Orlando Bloom and the stunt actor was provided by the client. And the cool thing about having rotomation ready during the mocap shoot was that it helped to nail the timing of the interaction between Philo and the troll, since the mocap actor could see how the motion capture aligned with rotomation right there on the mocap stage floor. And having a LiDAR set meant that we could also build an accurate representation of the set the way they shot it, basically meaning that the actor could then interact within on the set and perform the mocap take, see on the screen the way it aligned, make adjustments, repeat. So as the result, the motion capture aligned really well with the plate and required way less animation adjustments on top than would otherwise be necessary. We still had to have had animation adjustment for the hands when troll grabs Philo, but that's the kind of thing you can't. It's very hard to nail that in a motion capture. But overall, it aligned pretty well. All right, next up. Next, let's look how we rendered and integrated the troll. So after all the cleanup has been done, we could then add the troll. Boom. We also used actually the rotomation geometry. We rendered that out as well to help with the interaction between troll hands and Philo clothes, as well as adding shadows onto the troll. So we used V-Ray to render this, and both the troll and DigiDouble came with light selects, which is individual contributions of individual lamps, which we use them a lot at Goodbye Kansas. They give a lot of control in comp to fine tune and match the render to the plate. Here are light selects for the troll, and here are the ones for Philo. Besides the light selects, we also rendered the standard AOVs, such as world and object position, diffuse color, SSS, UVs, cryptomats. We even had custom look dev masks for skin, normals, and others. These are absolutely necessary, and they, of course, helped us a lot with masking and adding extra control in comp. So let's go back to the render. Boom. So using position paths, UVs, and cryptomats, we've masked out only the parts of the DigiDouble that we really needed for the integration. One challenge of this entire sequence was that this underground arena consisted of flickering candlelight and was a bit hazed up. So all these render passes gave Compass a lot of control to then tweak the light selects, add haze, grade them, add flickering that matched the particular lamps, warp the CG when needed, and just adjust the renders so they would sit better in the plate. So this is this is roughly halfway through the comp, and here is the original plate compared to final comp, and here's the comparison between the untouched renders and the final comp. And this concludes this little breakdown of the fight sequence. Overall, Carnival Row was a fun show, and because of the pandemic break on the client side, pretty long going too for us. The show was awarded to us in the end of 2019, and the last shots were delivered in mid 2022. Other work we did on the second season included rendering and comping in multiple CG creatures, creating magical transformations such as human to werewolf transformations, comping in physical effects like explosions, comping in fairy wings, a lot of fairy wings, creating set extensions and others. And as a fun bit of trivia, according to internal data, our in-house VFX supervisor drank 359 soda cans and consumed 226 protein bars during the project's duration. This is how well we track the data at Goodbye Kansas, people. All right. Lastly, let's check out our VFX breakdown for the whole season. And that's it. Thank you all for coming. And here's our contact info. I wish you all a nice day and a fun FMX. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dennis. That was super cool. Questions time. Anyone has any questions?
Yes. So this is why.
Dennis, I just got a question. Should I pass the mic on to the people?
Or I could repeat the question meanwhile for this one. So how did we solve the camera when there were two plates? What was the camera workflow? This is why I mentioned. So every plate had a match move camera. So the first thing we did is to roughly align the plates and then merge the keyframes of the two cameras to create a third camera, which then became to nail the timing of the throw. Then we used the keyframes of both cameras, aligned them, and then that became the third camera. And that third camera became the main render cam for the show. So everything else then, in the main comp script, that was the main render camera that the troll was rendered with, the one that we used. We used all three to add extra cleanup projections when needed or extra elements somewhere. But basically, the short answer: took both cameras, aligned the keyframes with the correct timing, and that was the main render cam. And that it took a couple of iterations to find so the keyframes weren't jumping, or everything felt nice. So yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, the impression is that there's a lot of fixing post
Mm.
in terms of the way they structured that.
Yeah.
How did that impact the budget? Was this expected or?
Well, yeah, that's actually a good question. So one thing, this is a TV series, so the budget was we had to be very time conscious, and some things, some shots, yeah, we just discussed internally. Some shots definitely could have been done without the plate stitching. Maybe not this one because it's a stunt, but yeah, in general, there were a lot of cleanup, but they also did. Uh, the client did a lot to kind of to give us to shoot as much as possible. For example, I didn't really show it because it was too finicky, but the stunt pads, they actually had like the stunt pads, the whole floor was covered in like this soft stunt pads, but they had the texture of an old grungy floor, so we actually just need to hide the stitches, stuff like this. So the basically short answer, the client tried to shoot as much as possible, and where it was not possible, that's where we come in and help out.
So I'm actually gonna pass the microphone because it's actually for the recording. Otherwise, we don't know what was the question.
Thank you. You've mentioned that a lot of artists worked on the cleanup process, and you mentioned also that communication was a main problem, or not a main problem, but a main reason.
It was important.
Yeah, it was important. In which aspects, and how did you manage the team to work collaboratively on this particular scene? What methods did you use? Maybe how you approach the shots with the artists.
So I mentioned templates. So at the beginning of the show, and this is like this on every show, regardless of if it's a CG cinematic, because we do a bunch of full CG shots, and like plate-based shows, and and for features. At the beginning of every show, we create templates, and then the entire comp team, with the comp lead or comp soup, we all sit down, go through a template, and basically just kind of align our workflow. Say, okay, this is how we're gonna work. If you're gonna do the cleanup, use this template. Please work in this way. Do what you need to do, but keep the scripts clean. Put the backdrops on everything. Try to work neatly, because if then some artist needs to take over, or this will be then published to the main. If a cleanup will be published to the main and to the main comp, then that artist needs to be maybe able to open that script and adjust extra. So but just basically, it wasn't really a problem. It was more of point that we try to achieve on every show, just to keep the workflow clean. We have also a very robust pipeline, so we have a bunch of pipeline supports. The way that we import assets, the way we update assets, it's all automated and it's all very visible. So just basically making sure that the artist, we have good templates, and make sure that all artists are aware of it, which templates, how to use them, and that everybody uses them. So yeah.
And question regarding the pipeline and those templates. How are you distributing them? Are you using Hero for conforming the shots?
Yes, yes. So for the conforming of shots, yes, we have an editorial department that we use Hero for that. And then those are published, we use FTrack. Those are published on FTrack. And then internally in Nuke, we have custom menus that are built in, that where we then pick the customary for just specific compositing sort of workflow, where we import the plates, import the CG assets. We get like, I guess it's pretty standard in most like mid to big sized VFX studios. But yeah, so those are part of the templates. And we try to strive to automating stuff as much as possible. So going from a show template to maybe like a subtask template, like a cleanup, but then going to a modular template as well. For example, we have a system where, like, if you import a CG asset, then you just click of a button, you have full on backdrop with everything that you might need for this asset, both like breakout of the light selects, or you maybe have a position pass point cloud there. You have a cryptomat separately there with a special filtering, so they don't get the filter hit, and so on. Yeah.
And do you also automate some slap comps for the 3D renders?
Yeah. So for example, for the well, actually, our lighters, we have a separate template that's called light slap. That it's very simple, A over B with some tweaking, so the lighter can have control, because the light selects are also at the first stage for our lighter, so they can render out, and then they can tweak in the light values, flickering and stuff like this. We push to comp because it's just way easier to control. But so the lighters can then use the light selects to really nail down an experiment. Then it's published as a light slap, and we usually have like a light comp and a light raw, where you have untouched render, just like as a sanity check, and you have what the intention is of the lighter. Same approach on CG cinematics as well. Exactly, lighter renders out with a bunch of passes, tweaks, brings it back to the 3D, or if there is no time, pushes it over to comper and say, then again communication. Hey, I've took the the dome light, I took it down half a stop, but the key light I took it up a half. So please, it's more reddish, and so the communication is always key.
When you're doing extensive cleanup with multiple artists, do you then put all the comp snippets together and render it out as one, or are you just exporting stitches and putting them together?
Usually falls on complete and VFX soup, not on the individual artist. As an individual artist, you get your task, your shot, but we also have we have dailies, and we have daily syncs where we sync between the artist and the comp soup. So we have a hybrid system where some people work remotely, some people work in the office. So again, communication, we try to set up so there are rounds, dailies, just hangout meetings where you can join and hang out. So, but to answer the question, usually that doesn't follow an individual artist to create a sort of, to see that in context. Usually falls on the VFX soup or a complete, to then see it in dailies and be like how it fits into the sequence. If that was your question, or
not really. It was like if one artist does a stitch for something, painting out something, will he just render out the stitch he made?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Basically, the rule of thumb: render out something, publish with publish comments, send it into the dailies. We'll watch it. So for this one in particular, that one was a collaboration between first editorial that stitched for the timing, then it went on to the comper that set up this task specifically was part of the cleanup task. So the cleanup was done on individual plates, and then the stitch was done afterwards. So then the artist did the cleanup, did the stitch, and then published it as a clean plate stitched asset on F-Track. Yeah, but the rule of thumb: work, publish, and we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and regarding those intelligent nodes now coming into 14, but I guess this was done on 13, Nuke 13, right?
Oh, this was actually done on 12,
12,
because
yeah.
13 took a little bit. Oh, shit, why are here? So 13 took a bit of an implementation into the pipeline because of the switch between Python versions.
Okay.
So this was, and that's why adaptation can take a long time, specifically with things like this. And here you could see that this was very like just a regular work, nothing really like super fancy. Just a good old frame holes, 2D projections, warps, 2D tracks, and stuff like this.
Okay.
Yeah, but we've used both 13 and even a little bit of 14. 14 we are especially keeping our eyes on, because we have invested a lot in USD pipeline, a lot. So we are very, very curious to see where Foundry takes it, and we are very we are trying it out, and we're gonna, because we're big adopters of USD.
But you didn't have at the time any of your internal machine learning tools for the cleanup or anything like that?
No, not on this one. We tried it on other projects, but those I can't talk about yet. Okay. But yes, but because this one is a couple of months ago, and that's why we can talk about it. But internally, yes, we've done some tests, both for both using Nuke tools and just using like external tools, building external. One of our VFX supervisors did tests, I guess, using PyTorch is the implementation. Yeah, exactly. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting, pretty big, and it's going to just be bigger. This tool set. Yeah.